Are we all here now? I think we are. Wow, what an interesting morning. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as me. I've written down loads of things to do, loads of contacts to make, so really fantastic. Thank you to the council for supporting us and hosting us in this wonderful facility, and thanks to EcoAction for pulling it all together, and thanks to the Chamber as well for setting up the booking system. So I'm Christina Ewbank, and my background actually is in the motor industry with Mercedes-Benz for 30 years. But I now head up Eastbourne Chamber and the Alliance of Chambers in East Sussex and EDL Enterprise Agency. And we provide support for businesses in all sorts of ways, and we are focusing on how to help businesses become carbon neutral and signpost everyone to the people that they need to help them. One of the things I would like to say is, you heard this morning from Caroline that Eastbourne is the sunniest place in the country. It's official. We know it because we live here. We believe that Eastbourne is the best place to work in the country, to live, work and play in the country for several reasons. One, it's beautifully sunny. The countryside is fantastic. When southern water behave themselves, the seawater is excellent, and we have a great work-life balance. We also have amazing connectivity. Lightning fibre are going through the town like a hot knife through butter. So if you want 1,000 megabits per second up and download speeds, you can have it. But more importantly, we all work together. We have an amazing enterprise culture in East Sussex and Eastbourne. We work with all the MPs, we work with all the councils, we work with the local enterprise partnerships, both of them, either side of us, and we work together as organisations, and that's what we're doing here today. So Eastbourne, if you're not here, come to Eastbourne. It's a great place to live, work and play. Anyway, today we're all facing a very serious energy crisis and dangerous global warming. So we're here to talk about what we can do as businesses to deal with that. So let me introduce the panel brought together to help us deal with these challenging issues. So first of all, Patrick Allcorn, if you could wave at everyone, lovely. Patrick heads up the local energy team for the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. And what that does is it supports LEPs and local authorities to play a leading role in delivering some of the things we need: renewable energy, retrofits, green transport projects, skills training, and support for rural communities. Before that, Patrick led a team that designed and implemented the domestic renewables heat incentive and developed policy on community energy. He's also been a journalist and a consultant in his time. Next is Adam Bastock, who's the founder of Small 99. Adam's been working with SMEs for 8 years, helping them to understand and develop their digital marketing. He realised some time ago that net zero and climate action was full of jargon, and that the average business owner didn't understand it and was terrified of it. So he set about giving clear and actionable guidance to businesses to help them become carbon neutral, and we really need his help. Next is Richard Garland. Richard is the founder of Chartered Surveyors Gradient Consulting and a director of the Chamber of Commerce. The company Gradient is very forward-thinking. They are certified B Corp, which is very rare in their sector, and that's all about balancing people, profit, and the environment. They are signed up to the Better Business Act and the SME Climate Hub and have a roadmap in place to achieve net zero by 2030. So we can all learn from Gradient. Joanna Saady, you've already seen. Joanna is a chartered architect, and really interesting presentation from her. So we will be asking you about the blue building, how that was so blue. She has a Master's of Science in Energy Efficient Building and Conservation of the Historic Environment. So really helpful in a town like Eastbourne, which is full of Victorian and Edwardian buildings. And Shelaine Siepel, is that the right pronunciation? Siepel. Siepel? Siepel. Shelaine Siepel, Managing Director of the Sustainable Business Partnership. She also has a Master's in Science and Technology for Sustainability and delivers projects that focus on embedding sustainability into business operations in a genuine, long-lasting and authentic way. And I think that authenticity really came through. So I have some questions already. Do put questions into the chat as well. We'll come to those later. First of all, though, I don't know if anybody saw Therese Coffey was interviewed on Sky and put on the spot recently. She is the Secretary of State for DEFRA, which includes environment, and she was asked what she does personally to improve her carbon footprint. And she struggled, which I think many of us would struggle when you're put on the spot. But I'm putting our panel on the spot. I'm going to ask each of you what you do in your personal lives to improve your carbon footprint. I'll come to Richard first, because I know that he's done a lot about this, and it'll give the others a chance to think. Richard.
Thank you, Christina. Is this working? Yep. Well, I've probably got quite an easy one, because I no longer drive. So I rely on public transport, cycling and walking to get around the town, but also to get to the construction sites and the properties that we work on. I found it a tough ask to start with. I got wet, I got knocked off my bike twice in the town centre, and obviously the buses can be a little bit of an ad hoc basis in terms of reliability, but it takes a bit of time, and I think if you work at it, I'm very fortunate that I don't have to taxi my daughter around anymore, so that does enable me to go car free, but if you stick with it, it works.
Thank you, Richard. Let me come to Patrick next.
Lots of little things, not full-on change like that. So, you know, I do walk more. We do a lot more local shopping that we can walk to rather than big out-of-town shopping. We've taken staycations, so holidaying in this country rather than flying, both last year, this year, and indeed next year. And we've reduced the amount of meat we eat. So we have meat-free days in the household, which with 2 young boys doesn't always go down as well as it might, but they're learning.
Thank you. Let me come to Joanna now.
Does this work? Can people hear me? Yeah. So I'm really virtuous because I'm a vegetarian, which is quite a new thing actually. I don't buy any new clothes or furniture. I always buy second-hand if I possibly can. Obviously not socks and pants. I holiday in the UK, and I just try not to consume much energy. So the lighting in my house is really bad.
Shelaine.
So I'm really glad you asked this question, actually, because it sort of makes you realise and look at yourself and think, actually, what am I doing? Like you, I don't buy things new. Most of my clothes are second-hand. And when you have small boys, actually, there's a huge reuse culture amongst parents that's really embedded already. So you don't have to do that. And I've just completed, or in the process of completing, a sort of second-hand refurbishment of a 1960s house. And what I've found really nice about it is that you're not spending so much on the stuff, for example, a second-hand kitchen, but you are investing in local skills and the local economy, and I really believe in keeping money in the local economy. So I either buy things that are second-hand, or I buy things that are good and can be repaired. And as I was thinking today, I was like, actually my boots I've got on, they are leather, but I bought them from, do you know Bourne? That's like an independent, lovely independent clothes shop in Eastbourne. Mm-hmm. And I sort of looked at everything I was wearing and I'm thinking, actually, it's those local buying choices and those sustainable buying choices that have to permeate all of your decisions, because the money that you spend on the big things like your car or your wedding or your events, like that's the keeping money within the framework of the things that you believe to be important is, I think, very important.
Thank you. And last but not least, Adam.
Thank you. I think the main thing really is travel. So stop flying. A couple of years ago, so last year we went down to Italy and also down to the south of Spain by train. So just took a slightly longer holiday and got the train down to Paris and then Paris to Barcelona, Barcelona to Madrid. It was a very pleasant journey. It was, not a difficult decision to make in terms of having a longer holiday in Spain. So that's probably the main one. And then even within the UK, doing a lot of train travel as well. So came down from Fort William on kind of Wednesday evening, and that was on the sleeper train as well, and that was good. So I think travel's really a big one that you have quite a lot of control over, that is in terms of personal footprint, is where you can make the most changes, and I think that's what we've had as well.
Thank you very much. I hope that's given you some great ideas. I should fess up, I worked with Mercedes-Benz for 30 years. I did have an AMG 4-litre car, which I loved. I now have got rid of that, and I drive an electric smart car. So, Andrew, I'm going in the right direction, and I live in an eco house with grass on the roof. The only thing I have noticed with the grass, that the house is much easier to heat, but you get a lot of spiders. So having been terrified of spiders, I now just, there's another spider. So, but I do recommend it. I hope that's given you all some great ideas. Now, yesterday, Jeremy Hunt announced that there's going to be a new nuclear power station at Sizewell C. So I wanted to ask the panel that, given predicted global warming of over 1.5 degrees, which is pretty serious, is there still a place for traditional coal, gas and oil energy, fracking, and is nuclear the right way to go? So I'm going to come first of all to Adam with that. What are your thoughts, Adam?
I think, really kind of pertinent question. In terms of nuclear, my kind of stance on it is that it's a very good technology. We do need it. However, the downsides are that it is quite slow and expensive to build, compared to especially something such as wind and solar, which at the minute, kind of megawatt hour is around £40 with wind and solar. That's including offshore. With nuclear, I think the Sizewell C strike price is around £92, but also inflation linked. So immediately you're seeing that in the future you're signing yourself up to quite a large cost there, and if wind and solar start decreasing and battery storage increases, that might be a slightly a quicker way to decarbonise. I think oil and gas, absolutely not. New oil exploration is not aligned with 1.5. And I think 1.5 degree is a limit. It is not a goal or a target. It is, if we go beyond that, then we risk serious destabilisation of the economy, essentially. So I think anything where you're looking at fracking as a short-term fix is, it's not even, from an environmental point of view, incorrect. From an economic point of view, it is not sustainable either. So, yeah, my thoughts on it.
Thank you very much. Patrick, what do you think about it? Are you able to share your thoughts with us?
I can share some of my thoughts with you from a government perspective, not all of my thoughts. I think, we need to balance, find the right balance in all of this. And, there is clearly a role for gas now. If we turned off all gas today, everybody would freeze this winter. So we can't, there is a transition period, and we have to recognise that transition period is there, and we need to have the energy at a price that is affordable. And so you saw a lot of conversations in the autumn statement around affordability, energy security, resilience, as well as net zero. And I think it is that balance. So if you look to 2040, 2050, then no. I think that you are looking at phasing these fuels out. But you've got to keep British business competitive at the same time. So if the rest of the world is using much cheaper energy sources, and we're importing all of our goods from those countries, and we've just offshored all of that carbon so that we make ourselves feel virtuous, but actually we haven't reduced the global emissions, then that's not really working for the planet either. So it's around getting the balance right globally as well as locally on energy sources.
Okay. Can I actually ask Shelaine what your thoughts are about onshore wind turbines and solar fields? Have you got any thoughts about those?
Well, I have personal thoughts, but I think we have to embrace as much renewable technology as we can. I think going back to the point about nuclear, I find the rehabilitation of nuclear as a low carbon technology and bringing it and sitting it alongside renewables quite disingenuous, because at the end of the day, until we solve the waste problem, there is a long-term issue that we are punting to generations who aren't born yet. And that's, for me, that doesn't sit with sustainable development. So yes, I support onshore wind farms. Yes, I support onshore solar farms, because all of those things can be dismantled and taken apart if and when needed. And a long-term nuclear legacy cannot.
Okay, thank you. Richard, can I ask you to comment on both those things? So nuclear power, energy, gas and oil, fracking, coal, but also wind turbines and solar fields.
Wow. Okay. So in answer to the first question, with the exception of nuclear, I agree with Patrick. I think there is a transitionary period to get us through to 2050. I would like to understand better from the government as to how much fossil fuel we can actually take out of the ground before we do hit this 1.5. But then in saying that, my understanding of what I read at the moment is the 1.5 is bust, and we should be expecting 2 degrees rise at the least. In terms of wind farm and onshore wind farms, I want to say I'm a fan. Is that obviously there are less emissions involved in construction in constructing onshore wind farms than there are offshore. However, onshore can be less efficient because there's less wind than there is offshore, so that's a challenge. In a place like Eastbourne, surrounded by a national park and the Downs, I absolutely accept the environmental and social impact of what an onshore wind farm might look like, but I think it's part of the vision and that transition towards being more secure both nationally but also locally in terms of energy as well. And I'd probably add to the solar field discussion is the solar trees. So we're seeing a lot more, particularly in Europe, where we're seeing trees which have got the solar panels on them. I think they would be a great addition perhaps to the seafront, so there's no reason why we can't look at bringing in solar trees to answer the solar field question.
So I'm expecting everyone to Google solar trees now, because I have no idea what they look like, but if you can find them, have a look on your phone. I'd like to do a straw poll, actually. I'd like to ask everybody in the room what your thoughts are. We have 3 wind turbines at Stones Cross. Some people hate them, some people think they're very elegant. Can I do a straw poll in the room? Would you be happy to see more wind turbines on land in the south of England? If you'd like to see them, can you raise your hand? Okay, that looks like the majority. If you absolutely do not want to see them, could you raise your hand? So there's one person who doesn't want to see them. I think that's the message we should take back to the government, really important. And the other thing is solar fields. There is a solar field on the way to Ripe. When it first went in, it caused a lot of trouble. Now you can't see it because it's surrounded by shrubs. Does anybody, I'd like to ask, how do you feel about solar fields? Are you positive about seeing more solar fields around and about East Sussex? Hands up if you think it's a positive move. I think that is a majority again. Hands up if you think it's a bad move. A few more people there. Okay, thank you very much. That gives us an idea. Right, we all need to reduce our energy charges. Did you want me?
That's the most popular question.
That one, okay. I'm just about to open it up to the floor. Before I do that, I wanted to ask you what actions you've each taken in your businesses to reduce energy and be more sustainable. If you could just pick on a couple of items that have made a real difference to your business. Joanne.
So, well, we've got a smart meter, which we've had recently fitted, which I think they're absolutely brilliant. So we can see when we put the kettle on, and we can see. So we've changed all our lighting to low energy lighting, and it's made a massive difference. And that's the most important thing that we've done recently to reduce energy consumption.
Great. Shelaine.
I'd say the big thing is when we organise events, we make sure they're done as sustainably as possible. And I'd like to congratulate the organisers for not even having a how to get here by car section on the website, because at the end of the day, the events have a really big environmental footprint when people are travelling. So running sustainable events with as little waste as possible and as little car travel as possible is really good.
Thank you. Adam.
Yeah, quite a difficult one, 'cause we're quite a small organisation, quite new as well, so everyone works from home, and my travel footprint's the main kind of emission really. In terms of the energy that we consume, we're really looking into our digital emissions, so we've got an online tech platform that provides net zero plans, so we're looking at what's the hosting impact of that and where are the emissions tracking for that. So we use Google Cloud Service, and that gives us a report on how many emissions we're creating through that. I think currently it's about 0.001 kilograms or something tiny. So that's what we're tracking is as that grows, how are we kind of contributing in other ways, and what's our footprint there? Because internally as an organisation, our energy is quite minimal, really.
We're all communicating by email so much more. When we communicate by email and reply to all and attach loads of things, is that bad for the environment?
It does have an impact on it. So, I mean, Google's quite good with that in that they are starting to build their own wind turbines and solar panels to try and reduce their energy emissions as an organisation. But every attachment has every megabyte of attachment will have a footprint attached to it, and that can add up quite quickly, especially as you say, if you're sending thousands of emails a day or month or whatever it is.
So we need to be careful. Don't reply to all and don't attach things.
Yeah.
Okay. And Richard.
I think to add to that, I read a statement from the recent COP 27, and it said that 4% of our global greenhouse gas emissions come from digital data being moved around the world. So it probably, we're only just offsetting that with solar panels. In terms of what our business is doing, I'll probably go back to the beginning when we looked at making sure everybody in the team was getting some education around environmental aspects and issues, so that we understood the language and we were able to talk as a group, as an entire business. That enabled us very quickly to look at our scope 1 and 2 emissions. It's not as difficult as we all think it is. I'm sure many people have already calculated it in this room. But that really is a bit of an eye-opener, and that gives you the basis for putting a roadmap together. It shouldn't be something that we think is complex. Small steps make all the difference.
Thank you. I'd like to come to the next question with Patrick, because this is apparently a very popular question. As you can see there, B&B has announced that they're closing for 2 months this winter to avoid high gas bills. How can Eastbourne be heated renewably and affordably and quickly, I guess, if we're going to do it before winter?
Well,
Any ideas?
I don't think quickly is really an option given where we are, and I think that we should all remember that the best energy is the energy we don't use. So, retrofitting, insulating, and that's not necessarily the whole house insulation that you see through the government programs around eco and things, but just draft proofing, blocking chimneys when they're not in use so that you don't get the draft. Very simple things that can be done and can be relatively cheaply done through DIY with local stores. So I think that's the first thing. I think in terms of renewable heat, the options for somewhere like Eastbourne are pretty much electrification and heat networks. So understanding where you have the density of heat that you can have a heat network, where there's enough demand, where you can generate that heat from, and then for the rest, heat pumps, whether that's ground source or air source heat pumps for the properties themselves. So I think there are grants out there to support that move. There are programs out there on heat networks, and I'm sure Eastbourne have have done work looking at their heat network opportunities. But those are the things that will be the future of heating in a town like Eastbourne. Obviously, heat pumps comes with a significant amount of more electrical demand, and that's where it becomes another interesting question around where that energy is generated, considering that most of the southeast grid is already at constraint, and how you get the electricity into Eastbourne and around Eastbourne. So I think I wouldn't look at heat in isolation, because if you're electrifying heat and you're electrifying EVs, then you've got a huge additional electrical demand. So you need to start to think about your renewable energy sources and the generation side as well. So it's a package, and I think for a council area like Eastbourne, working with landlords, working with social landlords, private rented landlords, understanding your properties and building that plan is the first thing that needs to be done, because you need to do it at scale. One property at a time doesn't really help.
And is there a heat network, successful heat network locally that we can look at?
I don't know where the nearest is off the top of my head. There are lots of heat networks around the country now. The primary source of the early heat networks was gas. We've now created a green heat network fund that requires the sources of those heat networks to be renewable as well. So there is, and I'm not sure that any of those have yet been built out.
Okay, thank you. There was a question that came up for Joanna, which sort of links into this. The retrofit house that you showed us on your last slide, the blue house, what had they done to be so effective?
It's not actually blue. It was just the thermographic surface shows it at blue because it has so little heat loss. And it was done with a total tea-cosy approach. So it's got external wall insulation that is oil-based. It's EPS. As that leads up, they completely insulated over the entire roof structure. So you've got a complete kind of as I said, tea-cosy, and that was, they've got here, the wall was 250 millimetres, so a lot of insulation, and the roof was a combination of 400 deep between joists, and then the slates and the battens over. So that's what, it's that, and obviously triple glazing.
That sounds like a big project.
Well, because it's a terrace, it's actually incredibly effective. So, yes, it was to Passive House NFIT standard, so it was the first in the country.
Can you do that sort of thing in a conservation area? Because much of Eastbourne is a conservation area.
No.
Okay, forget that. Thank you. There is a question behind. Do none of the panel recycle household goods, as no one mentioned it, and it is easy to do?
We took it as given.
Who was it raised that question? Do you want to tell us what you're doing? Brett, tell us what you're doing.
Well, I recycle all my household goods. We compost. We also go meat-free twice a week. We only use one car now and not two, so we walk and cycle more often. That's about it for the minute, I think. We haven't had any holidays yet. Weather hasn't been good enough.
What's really frustrating is that this is probably going to stop working in 2 years, and then I'll have to get a new one, and that is very, very bad. So something's got to be done about that.
Actually, on that point, I've just got a new Nokia phone. Nokia have launched a global recycling system where you send them your old phone and they give you a new one that's made largely from recycled plastics and materials. It's a monthly subscription fee. You can swap your phone whenever you want to for a new model.
Oh, that's good to know.
But none of the phones get dumped.
Thank you. Now let's just have a look, see what questions have come up. What are the best ways for businesses to contribute towards biodiversity through business activity, to move away from consumption to become regenerative? Who would like to speak about that? Richard?
Right, so we're construction project managers, so a lot of time, we're now finding that we're spending a lot more time early on working with our clients to look at how design can work in terms of nature-based systems. So not only put in solar panels onto green roofs, but also small things like bee bricks, which I believe now are part of a planning condition for Brighton and Hove City Council. So for a few £, you can add some bee bricks to a development.
What's that? What's
a bee
that?
brick. So
Beet brick.
A bee brick is
Oh,
basically a brick with a hole in it
brick,
for a bee to live in. Nothing more complicated than that. And in terms of regeneration, but in terms of sustainability, looking at environmental and social impact, we're also looking at orientation of buildings, shading, making sure that water's captured and is harvested in the right way. So there's lots of things we're doing with our clients early on in the concept of a design to make it more regenerative.
Thank you. We've only got a couple of minutes left, so I'd like to ask the whole panel a final question. In an ideal world, what action would you like to see the government take to help us improve the sustainability of our town? So can I come to Joanne first?
I'd like to see a green, a system of green retrofit that's actually achievable. The latest Green Deal was incredibly complicated, and I saw some slides where you've got to get 3 quotes for everything. Well, I mean, you're lucky if you can get 1 quote, let alone 3. So I'd actually like to see a much simpler system, and also VAT on retrofit. VAT is new build is VAT free, and I think that's a shocking disgrace. I think that we should, if you want to do energy efficient measures, it shouldn't be 5%, it should be 0%.
I don't know if everybody knows that, but if you are refurbishing a building, if you knock it down, you don't have to pay 20% VAT. If you refurbish it in any way, I think if you just keep one wall, then you have to pay 20% on the whole building, which is a concern. Thank you. Shelaine.
I was going to say exactly the same thing, so now I have to quickly think of something else.
Oh, sorry.
Absolutely, we need to level the playing field to make the most sustainable choice the cheapest and the easiest. Like, we all might be converts in this room, but until the more sustainable choice is cheaper and easier than the alternative, we will not bring everybody along with us. So let's look across the board and look for ways to make those choices the choice that the people that will make that on in this room.
Patrick, can you tell us what we should be asking government for that they can actually give us?
Not without getting into trouble. So I think there are opportunities around levelling up and devolution, around some of the funding. UK SPF funding requires a net zero element to it. UK SPF levelling up funds are about 4 billion for the country. So, and yet when you look at the bids that places put in, they don't necessarily use them to drive net zero. They add the net zero in. So I think it's not so much about asking what government can do for you. It's about making sure that you're making the most of what government's presenting, and then saying these are the gaps. Because it's very easy for Treasury to go, oh, but they could have done that through this fund, or they could have done that through this. And if you've not tried it, and if you've not done it, then HMT will always have that as their reason not to do something. So it's about having a strategic plan. So I think having a strategic plan, whether that's for Eastbourne, whether that's for East Sussex, whether that's for a wider partnership, depends on the politics, it depends on the demands. But I think there are pockets of brilliant work going on in Eastbourne and in East Sussex that isn't even shared across the other councils within East Sussex, district councils in East Sussex, let alone wider. And so optimising what you're doing so that you can make an evidence-based ask of government is, I think, probably the best thing that can be done.
We have run out of time now, but very quickly, can I ask Adam and then Richard?
Yeah, so very quickly, I think carbon pricing or carbon taxes, as soon as you start putting even a small amount of pricing on carbon emissions, you start to see everything else fall into place very quickly. I think the carbon price on coal was around £18 per tonne of CO2 in 2010, and that's what really drove the reduction of coal from around 20% of energy generation to what 0% or 1% it is now. So I think some sort of carbon pricing mechanism needs to be implemented.
And Richard?
I'd like to see that the council or the town gets more control over its infrastructure. I think we need to acknowledge that the county council do a great job, but I think as a town we need control of our infrastructure so that we can put in place cycle routes, we can put in place green corridors, electric zones for electric vehicles. I think we need to do that quicker and sooner, and the only way we can do that is if we get control.
Right, well, we are completely out of time now, so there is a question on the board, but I'll let you all think about that. And if anybody's got any answers, let me know afterwards. Thank you all very much.
Thank you to this panel. Let's work towards unitary control. Thank you everyone for this morning. We've set the scene for you. We've brought you up to date with some of the new technologies. Now we need to work out how we're going to work together to put this into place. So that's what we're talking about this afternoon. So I'm just going to give Jill just 30 seconds, and then after that we can all go and have some lunch.
Yeah, I don't want to keep anyone from their lunch. I'm going to be really quick. But Shelaine did mention event organising and keeping it sustainable. So I thought it might be worth a quick word. We've tried as hard as we can to keep it sustainable today with no plastic. So the card badges. No disposables. I did say if that was a problem I'd wash up myself, but they haven't taken me up on that. And the banners outside were made from recycled plastic, and we borrowed the stands. So it's always useful when you're running an event to put a call out and say, has anyone got this or that? And then we can use those things. So we tried to buy very little. We had a very low budget, so that was also essential. Just wanted to mention that the exhibit, there's a lot to see in the hall, as you've seen, but the exhibit does extend to the outside. Birchwood have bought 3 electric vehicles, including a large e-transit van. So talk to them and have a look at that outside. This afternoon, when you come back, we'll be going full solar. So if you think you like solar, then you're going to have a wonderful time. If you didn't think you liked solar, we hope that you're going to stay around because you may hear some things around funding and looking at some of the case studies of how people have benefited. You may decide that you'd like to try it after all. So do come back this afternoon ready for our solar section. Thank you.
Thank you. So all off for lunch and back at 1:45, please.